Hi guys, today I'm going to demonstrate how to apply my scribble technique to an actual subject matter. If you haven't already watched my introductory video on how to do cross-hatching and you're only new to this technique, I would strongly recommend that you check it out first, as there are a lot of tips that will be really helpful just to get you started. As you can see, I've already marked out a bit of an outline of an apple. If you want a really easy way to do this so you can just get on with practicing your technique, you can view my video on how to do a transfer. This is very similar to tracing, but you don't have to obviously hold your paper up to a window or a light table, and that way you can work on something slightly thicker like a piece of illustration board, which is what I'm using today. So today, as you can see, I'm drawing an apple. I've chosen this because it's a really great idea to start off with something really simple and slowly build up to the more challenging subject matters. So as we begin drawing, you can see that I'm starting off with the darker areas, and you will have remembered from my other video that I spoke about those dominant lines that have to kind of follow the form of the subject matter. Don't have too many lines that run either directly up and down or horizontal. So they go at a 45-degree angle from the edge of the subject matter. I'm just blocking in the darker areas first. I'm making sure that the edge of the dark area isn't too solid. I don't want to have a really obvious edge of where I've marked out that dark section. I want to be able to blend it into my lighter section. So I need to make sure that I'm not being too careful with the placement of my lines. Some of them should flick outside of where I've marked out my darker area. You'll notice that I've marked out roughly where my light areas and my dark areas are. This is because I'm unable to erase anything. I want to be sure that I'm not accidentally going to go into any of my light areas with my pen. So I've just marked out where I do not want to put my pen, and I've also marked out every time that the picture kind of changes tone. So again, with those directional lines, those dominant lines, I'm starting at the bottom and I'm starting to flick up and away from the base, making sure they kind of go outwards as the apple curves outwards itself. So they're wrapping around that shape. So they're just my initial lines, and then I will work back in with the cross-hatching over the top of that. So once I've got my main dark areas marked out, I'm just going to start adding in some of the other details. There's a bit of a shadow that runs along the center of the apple horizontally, so I'm just going to roughly place where that's going to be. Not going to make it too dark yet, just doing an initial mark out, because as I start to work in the other areas, the pen will then overlap on top of that and start to make that area kind of blend in but be a bit of a darker shadow. I don't know if you've noticed, but my pen has actually changed about 3 or 4 times already because it keeps running out. So I've had to change to this pen. It's not the best one. You can see it's leaving little kind of dark splodges on the page, but sometimes we just have to work with what we've got. So what I'm doing now is I'm actually holding my pen on more of an angle. I'm making sure to slow down the ink. So I'm still making just as many marks in my slightly lighter area, but I'm making sure the flow of the ink is less, so that the lines are probably a little bit thinner and a little bit lighter. There's less ink coming out of my pen. If I were to simply separate my lines and make them further apart, yes, I would be able to create a lighter section, but you wouldn't be able to create the same level of realism. So it's really important that instead of just doing what traditional cross-hatching suggests, which is you stretch your lines further and further apart, instead you actually slow down the flow of the ink and make lighter, more sort of delicate marks as well. You'll notice I'm always working from the dark towards the light. I try not to flick too many marks from the light section into the dark section. I'm trying to make sure that my light sections always have the marks going towards them. This is really important when you get to your really bright highlights, that you never put your pen down in the light section. You always work from the dark towards that light section. So I'm going to go ahead and speed this up a little bit now while I just continue blocking in this lighter area. You'll see that I'm just using the same technique repetitively, moving towards the light areas, and I'm just slowly building it up. The main thing is to build it up with layers. You must work in layers. Don't try to just suddenly have each tone sitting there and then blend them all together later. Gradually build it up. Don't try to do it all at once. Also make sure that you keep your edges nice and defined, and that will help your drawing to look slightly more realistic. Even if you decide to have lines spilling out over the edge, you can still have a nice crisp line that sort of runs underneath those creative marks that you're making. So as I move up towards the top section, you can see I've really slowed down my mark making. I'm being a lot more intentional and careful with where I'm placing my marks. I'm starting to use directional mark making again, those dominant lines we spoke about that should wrap around the form of the subject matter. And I'm carefully marking out where I want my pen to be and where I don't want the pen to be. So I'm making sure to just slowly go around that light area. I'm leaving a bit of a highlight at the top of the apple, just near the stalk, and another one on the face of the apple too. So I'm just making sure that I'm marking out where I do not want to place too much pen. That's going to make it just easier for me to work back into a bit later. Again, tilting my pen on its side when I get towards a lighter area, and really slowing down as I get towards the light area as well. If you compare my mark making speed now to before when I was doing the dark area, you'll see that it's a lot more controlled and a lot slower, because I don't want to accidentally make a dark mark into that light section. So it's really important when you do your light sections that you don't just have your marks kind of stopping at the edge of them. You do want some marks to go into the light section, which is what helps to create that gradual transition in tone. It makes it look blended. If you just stop, it's going to look more cartoony. It's not going to have that slightly realistic element that you may be going for. So please just make sure you have a few light flicks of pen that just go into your light areas. decide that you want to stop at this point, or you may decide to add some really creative marks in. Some people have these marks there as they go. I always add mine in at the end because I just can't help but control my drawings, and I like to add that creative element at the end. Thanks for watching, guys. All the best with your drawings, and don't forget to head over to my channel, subscribe, and check out all of the awesome art tips and tutorials I've got there. You'll even be able to find some different pen techniques if you wanted to try something a bit different to this one. Happy arting!